Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here again with Greg Nagy and Aileen and Janet and Sarah for our last office hours of the season for version 11 of HeroesX. And we'll be discussing the last three discussion questions for hours 22, 23, and 24. The 22 question is, do you think that the quest of Socrates, expressed as a theoria, is really heroic? I'm not quite sure how to answer that myself, but luckily we're not talking about my thoughts here. What do the folks have to say on the forums?
Well, one is saying that what is most remarkable about the heroism of Socrates is that he was an historic person, not a mythic person from prehistory. So do the words really heroic have a double meaning?
Yes. I think that's a very just question. Very, very just. I am stunned into silence by the question, but in all seriousness, there are people in history around that time who start getting heroized, even though they're not supposed to. So this is a violation of more ancient norms. And I'm thinking especially of successful generals like Lysander, and the list goes on. So the impetus to get yourself heroized, even though you're a historical person, is definitely in the air by this time. And after I had already published the book, Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours, I came upon a very interesting article by a professor called Stephen White at University of Texas that actually shows traces of hero cult for not just Socrates, but Plato himself at the academy, as practiced at the academy for many years after even Plato was no longer there. So I used to think that it's impossible to think of Socrates as a cult hero, but now I'm no longer so sure. That said, he's a different kind of hero in many ways than the heroes we know about in tragedy and before tragedy and epic.
He's not one of these heroes that you look back to see through a frame, like in the vase paintings that we discussed. There's a frame, for example, to, looking back to a past time where Nestor's, that tree used to be a hero, well, the grave of a hero.
I like the way you said that, dear Keith. Yeah, I see Socrates as a different model of hero. Also, Plato sets him up as a paragon of philosophy itself. So he represents very different values than whatever values we can generalize about ancient Greek heroes.
One of the participants actually suggests we could regard Plato's academy as effectively a sema for Socrates, which might tie in with what you were saying.
Oh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot, yes. In fact, we know that Socrates did have a hero shrine. I'm not sure we can localize it in the academy, but he did seem to have one. And we know that from the life of Proclus by Proclus's student Marianos. These are people involved in late stages of the academy, 5th century. Yeah. There's a wonderful story about Proclus as a teenager first coming to the Athenian region, and he lands at the harbor of Piraeus, and he's walking uphill towards the academy, which he's never seen before. He's very excited, and he gets échauffé. He gets very tired. It's almost like heat stroke, and he's in a modest way saying, "Can anybody find me a drink of water?" And his attendants find him a drink, and it turns out, as Marinos says in his narrative, that the water came from a spring that was inside the hero precinct of Socrates. How do you like that? That's pretty good.
Wow.
I explored all of this in work that postdates ancient Greek hero in 24 hours, but I still remember the words of Nicole Leroux, who I thought pointed out beautifully that even if there are heroic themes involved in Theoria, after all, you can say that that Solon, for example, the lawgiver of Athens, experienced a Theoria, a visiting of sites, seeing the world in a sacred way. So even though there are those parallels, and you could answer my hypothetical question by saying, well, yes, there are narratives about heroes who engage in Theoria. Nevertheless, he's a different kind of hero, even if we say he's a hero.
One of the participants mentioned that Socrates died what he believed in, for what he believed in, and he has his immortality for that, dying for immortality. I was wondering if the immortality given as a way of compensation,
yes,
by the society.
Yes.
Or, I'm asking a chicken and egg question, maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it from a very historical perspective, and by historical, I mean simply looking at historical facts, it appears that the Athenian state, which after all executed Socrates, did a few years later rehabilitate Socrates. So that is a historical fact. Whether they rehabilitated Socrates by allowing a hero called, I'm not ready to say. I think that's something that just happened within the context of the academy. And as for immortality, well, if we understand Plato's Phaedo correctly, Socrates is arguing for the immortality of the psyche, which we ordinarily translate as soul, across the board, not just for him, or not just for what we imagine a hero is, but for any human. I'll leave it at that, but that's not necessarily an overtly heroic model. So when we say, well, okay, Socrates achieved immortality, that quality of immortality might be simply by virtue of being a human. And it's just that he has the intuition to see life and death and possible coming back to life in a different way.
Well, should we move to the next question?
Yes, we shall, but without thinking that we have solved this. This is an open-ended situation, and Socrates, I think, would want it to be open-ended. He loves, at least from what we read in Plato, Socrates loved to leave debates open-ended. So we'll leave it open-ended, and then we can move on without a guilty conscience.
Perfect. Let's see then. Hour 23. The question you set, Greg, for this is there any way to imagine that Plato was actually present when Socrates died? If he really was there, why would he want to cover his tracks, as it were? Yes. And here you're referring to the fact that in the Phaedo he doesn't, I mean, he's not counted among the participants.
As a college student might say, he sicked out. or to say it more in the Greek way, he did not have the strength to be there. Now, what does that mean? This is the verb asthenein, not having strength. He wasn't up to it. Well, what does that mean? And I do have possible answers, but I'd like to hear more from our dear participants before I take a crack at it.
Yes, one participant thinks that Plato was really there at Socrates' death, but however, he thinks that Plato wants to make Socrates, in his writing, his own person, not just a literary creation. So Plato must be himself absent in the literary account, so that Socrates has his own.
Yes. Well, something I learned from a participant, not in this instantiation, but a previous participant, is you could say that sacrificing a rooster to Asklepios, which is a form of being cured of something, could be a cure for Plato as well. If Plato was sick, then sacrificing a rooster to Asklepios and having the word come back again and again, as we see at the end of the Phaedo, means that what Plato mediates also comes back again and again, and therefore the sickness of not being quote unquote present at the death as narrated is transformed into a healthy presence beyond the actual event through the words of Socrates as recorded by Plato. Well, maybe I'm outsmarting myself here and making things too complicated, but there may be some connection between the idea of Plato being sick or not having the strength to be there, some correlation between that and the whole idea of sacrificing a rooster to Asklepios, who is after all the cult hero responsible for not just healing, but bringing the dead back to life in mythological terms.
Somebody mentioned that he was probably there, but not to steal the spotlight from the dialogue, he's refraining himself.
Yes, yes. Well, yes, I'm very attracted to these scenarios. Very, very, very attracted. I am.
I was wondering the absent signifier. He is
Yes.
absent.
Yes, and therefore he means, therefore he signifies because he is absent. I love that. Yes. Where's Plato? Well, Plato can signify better if he's not there and let Socrates' words do the work, so to speak. My goodness, we've just hit upon another unanswerable question, another open-ended dialogue. But again, I think Plato's Socrates would approve, and I hope the historical Socrates might approve as well.
I'll take that as my cue to ask. Are we ready to move on to the final question?
Well, we'll never answer this question. but I so appreciate the visceral reaction of these participants, where they somehow intuit, and I think correctly, that Plato has to be absent to make the Socrates of his recreation work. Notice I didn't say creation, I said recreation.
Okay, hour 24. Why is it important for the citizens of Athens to think of the hero Theseus as a savior?
That's a big one, but that one is less open-ended. That one is a closed circuit. I think.
So one participant mentioned that did Theseus set an example in worshiping worshipping his divine father Poseidon and Athena, who became preeminent in Athens over other gods. So,
well, he became. I'd like to edit that, just that formulation, just a little bit. So he's a hero. Yeah, he is the son of Poseidon in some situations and son of a mortal father in other situations. That's perfectly okay. That's part of the kind of narrative that envelops cult heroes. But as a hero, he is special to Athens because, frankly, the stage of social development in Athens, which has reached what we call a democracy, needs a hero that is a democratic hero. And the mythology of Theseus is adjusted to fit, may I say, retrofit in the realities of the form of government that Athens has ever since the end of the 6th century, which is a democracy, with the exception of a few horrific episodes that we won't go into now. But basically, Athens is a democracy throughout the 5th and 4th centuries, which is the era we're worried about. And in that era, Theseus is projected as the perfect founder for the values of Athens as a democracy. And that's why I was joking at the beginning. That part of the formulation can be considered a closed circuit. There's no question why Theseus, of all heroes, should become the favorite hero of the Athenians. It's because he is the representative of the ideals of society in the 5th and 4th centuries, just to focus on that subset of the era we're talking about.
mm-hmm.
When I was reading this hour, I was wondering, why Delos? Why do they go to Delos for Theoria, not somewhere else?
Yes, well, that has to do with, again, the importance of Delos as a kind of nerve center for what makes Athens the most important city in the Eastern Mediterranean. Because Athens ideologically is the heir to the thalassocracy of good King Minos in Crete, which was the first thalassocracy of the Mediterranean. And as the heir of Minos, as a thalassocrat, if I can put it that way, Delos is the star of the whole Cycladic region of the Eastern Mediterranean. It is, as it were, the prima donna, the prima ballerina of all the islands that are called the Cyclades. If you think of them as female singers and dancers, and that's how the ancient narrative tradition imagines them. So Delos is the sacred nerve center of everything that Athens stands for. And to reenact the salvation of Athenians from King Minos and the Minotaur, I'm going back again to this myth about the thalassocracy of the Minoan civilization. If you go back to that, then essentially that sacred trip from Athens to Delos celebrates the victory of Athens as the civilizing power of the East Mediterranean, of the Cycladic region, so to speak, and as the heir of the heroic age of Minos. And after all, it's, if I can put it this way, Theseus who puts Minos out of business. as far as Athenian myth-making is concerned. So I see it as perfectly logical. I have no doubts here. It's an open and shut case, and all the written evidence points to the glorification of Theseus as the ideal Athenian hero.
So one of the participants is thinking about the origins of some of these myths, and say that the earlier periods of history, collapse of Mycenaean civilization, and then also comparing it to the historical period that we're now been talking about in the latter part of the project, and when Athens, as you were talking about, was a democracy, but also had a number of plagues and wars, and so they would be looking to that kind of myth and that kind of figure to be, as it were, that standing in for that ability to save the city.
I think that's beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we have a good place to end.
Oh, okay, and let me just say, again, I'm so grateful to the participants and to you four wonderful colleagues for bringing the word back to life, and what's more important, nothing. So with that, I say so long for now. I hate goodbyes.
Well, see you in version 12 then.
Perfect. Till version 12. Bye. Bye.